I'm a child of the 40s, and as a way of babysitting my brother and I, my mother would send me off to Saturday and Sunday matinees. There were newsreels, and I would weekly see images of people fleeing their bomb cities, going God knows where, on the roads, with carts, with all the possessions they can carry with them, children crying, people hungry. Those images are just so vivid in my mind still after all these years. This is one I started when we first went into Iraq. It's called a warrior doll. This is the only male doll I've done so far. Religion was a good force in my life at that time because as a child it helped me understand good and evil, and it was a way to place what I was seeing in the newsreels into some kind of context. So I still hearken back to that, and a lot of these images on child abuse really came from these other images, and also from images of the Catholic Church too. My language is always predominantly fiber. That's the basis. That's the language I speak. Maybe it'll be basketry materials or actual fiber itself or things that I've spun myself, whatever. So that's kind of sets my work apart a little bit from a lot of other people. When I was a weaver, I studied Navajo weaving. That was quite interesting to me, as well as just various other art expressions from other tribes as well as Navajo. But now I'm really interested in African minkizi, which are power objects, and they take many different forms, but many of them are figures, and those are really the inspiration for my dolls. That an object doesn't have to be pretty or beautiful. I just want it to be strong and to express something about how I feel in my body, whatever. These are dolls that I'm working on now. Having fun with this one. They're not put together, so they have to be lying down, and I'll be adding more to them. I've never worked on a lot of dolls at the same time, so I'm not sure how that's going to work. This is another one which I've just started messing with, kind of making arms, quilting them. We'll have to find some kind of thing for a head. This is another doll. I kind of like the way this one's going that I'm working on. For a while I only did one doll a year because I didn't want them to become formulistic. I've had these wonderful burnt buttons that I had jars and jars full, and I don't know, these may be skirts, or I'm not sure how I'll use all these as ornamentation. Very African looking, but they're just plain old shell buttons. And this is another doll that I'm working on. And this is the start of another one. I started my artwork on my own. I didn't take classes in the university setting. I didn't go on to get my MFA. And so I didn't have that network of friends to share ideas with and to, share opportunities with. So I sort of had to find that on my own, create that on my own. And when I first started, how I first got into doing artwork was here in Yellow Springs. I have closets full of found objects that I have fairly well marked and labeled in separate things like rocks, miscellaneous metal, rusted metal, hair, feathers, thorns, wire. So it makes it pretty easy to gain access to. I'm so glad I did that. And even though there's so many artists in town, everyone's kind of involved in their own little world. So I found I had to go to Dayton, and the Dayton Visual Arts Center was just starting up, and that was a wonderful opportunity for me too, to have this this great place with lots of different people. And it was important to me too that I worked with a lot of, painters, sculptors, whatever. And also through that group got to know more people back in Yellow Springs who are drawn to Dayton for that too. So over there is a sewing machine where I work on my quilts, which I'm not working right now. These are 2 recent quilts that I've done. Periodically, I just have to work in fabric, so I have to go back to making quilts, and you kind of sometimes need a little rest between them, or they're time-consuming for me anyway. There are quilt makers who are really fast, and I mean, really good quilt makers are quilt makers that are very fast, and they work on a series at a time. And I don't know. I guess some pieces you have a lot of trouble with, and they take a lot more time. I remember my first quilt took about 2 years because I got stuck on a place, not that I worked on it for 2 years, where I didn't know where to go. Didn't have enough flow to it, and I had problems to resolve. And that's true with the dolls too, that you may have a doll almost done, but there's problem like with this warrior doll. I haven't solved the problem with the arms yet, and so I really don't feel that he's finished until I can do that. And also, you may just see a piece one day, you think, oh yeah, that would go there. So
your brain is always working on that as you go about your day or wherever
probably
you
it
are.
is, though I'm not particularly aware of it. Or sometimes you might be in a thrift store and you just see a piece of something, or you may be walking along and you see a piece of rust on the ground and you think, oh boy. But for every piece of rust, I've got, you can see I have so many materials. I've got all these hands too. These and beautiful ones from India. I have feet. I love these feet. I think they're just... The thing is, they always make all right hands and all right feet. So sometimes you have to. Oh, and look at these. Isn't that beautiful?
That's beautiful. One of those.
Well, I had every kind of doll imaginable. I was very lucky. My parents always bought me dolls. And I also have this association with dolls from the Catholic school that I went to, too, because we had a practice in the 40s of adopting pagan babies. And pagan babies were children that were associated with various missions, like in Africa. And so we would all give money during the year, and when we had $5, we were able to adopt a pagan baby, and then we would vote on what name we were going to give the pagan baby. Whatever happened to all this money, I don't know. So that's another association I have with dolls, somehow or other, these pagan babies. Maybe that's what I should call my dolls. My focus isn't as strong as it used to be, and my energy level certainly isn't, so I'm trying to work with those things. I seem to have a lot of energy at night, so I'll often start around 9 or 10 and work until 3, 4, maybe even 5 sometimes. Not that it's really efficient work, but it's really hard for me. I find going into the studio very unpleasant a lot of the times because I'm so uncertain about what I want to do. And I don't know. I remember Joyce Carol Oates talking about the process, and she said you have to be an artist, anxiety is a given, and I'm sure some of us have more anxiety than others, but there are always those wonderful, joyful times when you are really cooking and things are going well, and nothing in the world is better than that. So I suppose it's worth it, and it's always hoping that you will achieve that sort of timelessness in your studio. I think I can't work on anything because I just am feeling overwhelmed with all these dolls in front of me.
So many dolls.
So many dolls.
So little time.
My mother got started in puppetry seriously in college, where one of her professors encouraged all of his students, by saying, why aren't you doing exactly what you want to do?
My mother and father designed a Marionette theater studio home.
This picture is one of my mother, Margaret Skewis. Her name she changed to Margot Rose as a result of marrying my father. When he watched the show from behind the scenes on Broadway, when he was just out of Antioch, my mother came down off the bridge and with the other puppeteers, and she said, "I hope you know what you're getting into." He couldn't possibly have had any idea.
My brother Rufus Rabbling Rose and I were allowed to work in the shop with a bandsaw, drills, vise, and all the other hand tools, a lathe. And we walked to the other end of the shop where my mother was painting or modeling puppets. So my parents were really very, very supportive of all of the creative instinct that might have surfaced as a 10-year-old boy. I was inducted into the puppet show, Rip Van Winkle, and I had a small part to play in that, and I've been running the lights and the sound and the curtain.
This is where I worked, over here. This is a turntable, and I remember the needles in this turntable. Some of them are made out of burnt bamboo, and some of them are steel. Right here is a switchboard, so I could turn the lights on and off. And these represent my parents and another person operating the marionettes.
But I really kind of got hooked on puppetry in my own right when I went to the festival in St. Louis in 1947. Bert Tilstrom was one of the professional performers. Of course, many of you may remember Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And what impressed me, aside from the enjoyment I had directly from what they were doing, was the fact that it had such an incredibly powerful hold on the audience. The slightest gesture with either of these two puppets, accompanied with a small comment, would get a roar of laughter. I thought, I have to do that. I have to have a puppet show. So we went home and I built a puppet show that I didn't really write it, I just made it up. Princess Morning was the name of it. And there were 2 knights and a janitor involved in this little skit. It lasted about 15 minutes. So that's how I got started doing puppets on my own, and I would charge $15 for a performance. And that income I made from it, plus the income I got from my parents' shows, got me through my first year at Antioch College. It's important to pay for a work of art so that the artist can have food, clothing, and shelter, and the respect that usually follows cash. I take my marionette Pepito down to the street fair frequently, spend an hour or two, and he begs for money on the sidewalk. He doesn't work for free either.
This is my lead marionette, Pepito the Clown, a mute orphan. He can't speak, but what he does is to wander the streets of Yellow Springs or the various 18th century fairs that we go to, and he waves to the passers-by. They'll come and say hello to him, and he'll respond. He's very friendly, so he'll get up, walk over and wave to a child. This controller allows me to operate his feet with my thumb. You can see this bar going back and forth. That's lifting one leg after another. This sub-control that hangs below the main control operates his hands. I can wave his hand, rotate it, wave it. You can see there's a string on his thumb, one on his pinky, one on his wrist, and one on his elbow, all from that one control. There's also another feature here. If you see this little toothpick, I can reach in with that toothpick and pick up a string that's hanging below the control, pull on it, and raise his hand up to his face. The costume is one I designed. My mother actually sewed this costume for me. And you can see the nose is pointed for a very good reason. I want to make sure that he's looking at you and that you know it, so his nose is fairly sharp.
Living in Yellow Springs, I think, is a a very wonderful opportunity for anybody who has interest in creative expression. It could be in any medium, music, dance, the fine arts, theater, what have you. Of course, I was a theater major when I was a student at Antioch. And we were very, very blessed at that time to have three marvelous directors, Arthur Lithgow, Meredith Dallas, and Paul Treichler. And we referred to them as the Trinity. Each of them was very strong as a director. Of course, Arthur Lithgow was the one who took the responsibility of instituting the Shakespeare Festival here.
This is Portia from The Merchant of Venice.
Mm-hmm.
She's dressed as a man because she's appearing as a lawyer to defend her lover. This young lady is Juliet. The statistics about male and female roles in Shakespeare are 17 to 1. And those ones were always done by young boys. So there were no females on the stage. This is Festay the Jester from Twelfth Night. This is Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream.
I had promised myself as a student that I would come back and teach technical theater at Antioch one day because I thought that would be something I could contribute. But I didn't want to go back without having experience somewhere else. And I'd gone to Yale and got my Master of Fine Arts degree at the drama school at Yale in 1963. And I spent a couple of years in North Carolina teaching at the Women's College of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Dal offered me an opportunity to interview for a job at Antioch, and I leapt at it. I wanted to get back to Antioch as soon as I could.
When I designed this marionette of William Shakespeare, I used the Droshout engraving, which is the most popular illustration of what Shakespeare is supposed to have looked like. And I had a nice time making that table. I turned the legs on my lathe. And the chair on which he is sitting is one that my parents had for me and my brothers as young babies. We used to sit in that. This would be the original.
The first thing I actually do with my hands is to make a drawing. And I do a front view and a side view at full size, that is 1/3 life size, the same size as the marionette. I then trace the resulting parts onto manila paper folders, cut that out.
That's a front view of the hip. This is a front view of the arm. Here's a side view of the same arm.
And trace those designs, both the front view and the side view, onto a block of wood.
Once I get it down to you imagine a pattern on the front and on the side. I've come part way to make this into a cylinder, and then I finish it off on the sanding machine. Or with a knife. It shapes up rather quickly.
I can then manufacture the joints, either by drilling holes and putting Venetian blind sash cord to hold the joints together, or some other, a metal shiv with a pin through it.
Not anybody in particular.
Well, I think he's probably a peasant.
Mm-hmm.
Once I've got all of that done, I'll make patterns for costumes on a piece of unbleached muslin, trace that, make a false costume. I don't want to waste my fine fabric on the first effort because it may not fit. Then I take the pattern, which has all the time been brought up to date to keep track of the changes. I'll put the pattern on a piece of finished fabric and manufacture the costume that way. I like to use stretch velvet as a costume material because it's very forgiving.
Here are Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, as I conceived them. And these costumes are of stretch velvet, which conforms to their bodies very nicely. If you go to the Salvation Army and Goodwill and find things like that, wigs.
That's good for hair.
It's good. And hats.
Mm.
When it comes to painting the marionette heads and hands, the first thing I do is after I've sanded them so that they're finished, I do a gesso coat, maybe possibly 2 gesso coats, which fills in some of the roughness if I have any left. And then I like to use what I call a wet process of painting. I'll put in a base skin tone, but I'll have some other tones ready, usually brown, white, black, red, yellow ochre, and then I try to let the colors fade from one to another, just like in makeup, for stage makeup, essentially the same thing. One of the things I do is to put what I call a strike in the eye. Once I've done the pupil and the iris and the white of the eye, a little white apostrophe. I do about 5, maybe 6 gigs in a year.
This is my banner that I set up outside my Punch and Judy booth to draw in a crowd. This is a photograph of my Punch and Judy stage, and I'm in costume, in an 18th century costume. And I believe this one was taken in Chatham, Ontario, at the fair at the Forks. This photograph shows me in my 18th century costume and Punch and Judy and the baby. Judy's holding the baby. In the Punch and Judy show, Punch is a terrible miscreant. He misbehaves all the time. He throws the baby out the window. That's a traditional bit of business in the Punch and Judy show. The baby makes noises in the Punch and Judy show. When he's unhappy, he cries. And when he's very unhappy, he has a disaster. This is the ghost who chases Punch around. Get the children all screaming in the audience. He's right behind you, Mr. Punch. This is Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Yes.
course, it's her baby that's thrown out the window. She loves Mr. Punch, and they love one another very much, and they express it by using slapsticks on each other. This is a slapstick. And this is the doctor. And Punch is so frightened by the ghost that he thinks he's dying, so he calls for a doctor. Here's the star of the show. This is Mr. Punch.
Mm-hmm. Legs and all.
Yeah. And that's part of the tradition, that he has legs. They're totally awkward and inoperable in the way. And these long, stiff hands that clap together. The hooked beak and the chin, the hunchback and the belly are all traditional, and they can be traced back into Roman comedy.
My.
There's a character called Macus who very much resembles him. Now, here's the alligator. This gets the kids in a big uproar.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's the whole point of the show, is to get them as loud as possible, so that teachers will have a wonderful time taking them back to the classroom.
I think of all of the arts really as kind of a response to the human capacity to think, to feel, to see, to perceive, to compare and contrast, and to see the infinite variety that surrounds us. And as artists, we have the opportunity to translate or to communicate with one another with our own feeble attempts to bring forth a kind of a celebration of the aesthetic qualities of our lives.
These are figures from a little 15-minute piece written by Martin Stevens. It's called The Toy Maker. It's a peace play. Spots and Stripes are friends, and they play with their blocks and discover suddenly that they're not alike, and they can't trust each other. They put on masks to frighten each other, and then they go to war. What happened? I thought you were on my side. I am. But how come you let Spots beat me? Well, I'm on his side too. Really? Yes. I want to show you something. Stripes, I want you to go and hit Spots. Oh, no. Yes, I want you to learn something. All right. So he does. Oh, he doesn't feel good. How come when I hit Spots, I don't feel good? Well, I want you to work. Do you know what you are? Yes, I have my head, I have my hands, and my shirt, and my arm, and you. That's not enough. Keep going. Oh, and there's Spots. We're all part of the same thing. And the toy maker is always here. That means we don't have to be afraid or angry or lonely. So then they go play with their blocks. Would you like to play with my blocks? Here, have some blocks. Oh, you play with my blocks. And so they have a good time. That's how that ends.
That's great, Jim. That's great. I hope you get to the point where you can perform it.
Oh, I'm practicing it because I have to perform it at a regional puppetry festival.
All right.
My brother Christopher took her in her 90s around to look at the various rest homes that she might possibly end up in. She said, well, they're all rather nice, but I don't know where I put my bandsaw. So she never left home. She stayed home.
The first time I wrote a poem was in the 60s, about 65, 66, somewhere in there, and I was the only black kid in my class. And the white kids, to get me in trouble, would write Black Power on the desk. And I had just gotten in trouble for that, and one of my teachers, who had chewed me out for that, assigned us to write a poem. So I wrote a poem to try and piss him off. And he liked it and asked if he could get it published. So then my head got all big and I decided I was a poet. And I started writing a lot of poetry then. But when I went to college, I joined a band, and we got to be pretty good. And so I started spending a lot of time writing lyrics. And lyrics are a little bit different than poetry to me. Lyrics are meant to be predictable so that you can kind of predict the words and sing along. Whereas poetry, you want to catch you off guard.
Why don't you sit down? No, I can't sit down. Why don't you sit down? No, I can't sit down. Why don't you sit down? No, I can't sit down. I just got to heaven once to walk around. I'm free. My great-grandfather, Addison White, became free through the Underground Railroad. He fought in the Civil War so that I could be free. Now, I'm free. No, I am really free.
I had always kind of resisted music because my dad was a professional musician, and it had created problems from what I understood in my dad and my mom's life. But I also remember as a very young child, because he was a jazz musician when I was a young child, and they would gather before they did their shows at the house, and with the bright horns, the vibes with Johnny Lido. I don't know if you know Johnny Lido, but the vibes player and all this type of stuff. They were really cool guys. They had that hip way of talking and walking and everything. So that just had a big influence on me. But then when I got into college and we started this band and it actually started getting us money, that really got things going. The music started taking over more than the poetry. And I started playing in bands, and through my life I've traveled the country. I've lived in LA for a while. And that's when I found out that I was pretty good, because I thought as a country boy from Mechanicsburg, Ohio, that there's no way I could be as good as these city kids from LA. But then I could play just as well as them, if not better. Then I moved out to Minneapolis, and several of us from our band moved out there, and they called us the Ohio Funk Invasion. And so we started playing with some bands and got pretty popular. And things were going pretty well, but then I decided it was time to come back home. I was working at the Girl Scouts at the time, and a friend of mine who worked there mentioned this thing called a poetry slam, and I'd never heard of a slam, and so I decided to go there and see what was going on. And what happened was, when it was my turn to perform, one of the featured performers that day didn't feel that I got the scores I deserved. And that's when I learned about the rowdiness, because I got eliminated in the first round the very first time I slammed. But after I got eliminated, every time they announced a poet, this guy named Jason Carney out of Texas, he would scream, "It should have been John Booth! It should have been John Booth!" And so I just thought it was so much fun, so I was just determined to come back. And that's what really got me back into the poetry, and I've just been doing it ever since. A lot of people have a lot of confusion about what a poetry slam is. There's a lot of confusion. Some people think that's the style of poetry that you do, but what it is, it's just a means of bringing poetry to the grassroots people. So a slam can include any type of poet. with the poetry slam, the points are not supposed to be the point. The point is supposed to be the point of your poem. And you're supposed to just take the scores as a joke. The poetry slam actually started in Chicago at a bar called the Green Mill, and that's probably the roughest venue. They have, in poetry slams, you get a score of 0 to 10 normally with a decimal point. And it's kind of like ice skating, where you get 5 judges, you have 5 scores, you drop the high and the low, and you add the 3 middle ones together. At the Green Mill, they can give you negative points. If they don't like your poetry, they will do things to you. Like if you're too preachy, they will start singing the Amen song at you and try to drown you out. If you use rhyming poetry, they will start guessing your rhymes out loud and try to disrupt you. If you do poetry that's offensive to women, they will do the feminist hiss at you. If you do poems that are offensive to men, they will do the men's grunt at you, and would actually chase you off the stage. There are also theme slams. Sometimes you might have a slam where you have to improv your pieces right off the moment. The way they do that is they get ideas from the audience, they put it in a hat. When you come up on stage, you pick the theme out of the hat, and then you got to do a poem right off the spot on that. Sometimes they have cover slams where you have to do poems by other people. It used to be that they could barely fill the slots that were available. Now they have to have competitions to be able to get into the nationals. So it's gotten so large, and it's actually, the National Poetry Slam is actually an international poetry slam, and every year there are people from all over the world. The really positive thing about the slam is I picked it up on my very first time. I went to the 2000 National in Providence, Rhode Island. And to me, it was like I was one of those youngsters who was just a little bit too young for Woodstock, but I appreciated it. And that was like my closest thing to Woodstock, because there was just the biggest mixture of people of different ages, different races, sexualities, nationalities, that all just got along. I'm pretty much a freestyle poet, but from time to time I will get into the disciplines like sonnets or haiku or quatrain, and just try to come up with something. And sometimes some of the poems that I thought were just nothing, just an exercise, turned out to be something that people really, really enjoy.
You don't have to take a lot of time to define this stuff, because it all ends in ism. Racism, sexism, ageism, nationalism, and all the rest of those isms. And it tries to drown not only me, but everybody. But if we are really free, we can rise above it, swim out of it, and really be free. We can use this freedom as a flotation device and rise above and really be free. So we have to choose. I've made a choice to try to rise above it all. And because I'm trying, I'm free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I am free at last.
Let me get to the poem here. I co-host a reading here in Yellow Springs with a gentleman, John Davis, who is a current resident, but I first met him when he was a member of a Chicago Poetry Slam team, and we competed against each other. And we were walking down the street one day. I was pushing my baby stroller, and he was pushing his, and we were looking at each other like, I know you. And then we got to talking and figured out where we knew each other from, and then that's how the neighborhood poetry event materialized. The neighborhood started out as a monthly open mic with jazz. And we have an amazing jazz band with students who pretty much all of them have graduated from Central State University Music Department, which is top notch. And then John Davis and I host. Well, our typical format is we start out with our family-friendly set, and we encourage local youngsters to perform. We try to give a chance to nurture young people. That's one of our missions, is to help young people develop their talent. And so we give them a comfortable, safe, friendly venue to perform their poetry and to get a chance to get feedback from an audience. And then we usually separate that with a set of jazz music, and then we have what we call the adult swim. And that's where we have no restrictions on language. We warn the people, if you don't want your children to hear this might be time to leave. And then a lot of our poets who come have an opportunity to perform with a jazz band backing them. I would love to get some more of my music out there. So I put a CD together with myself playing all the music, and I kind of make a joke. I have a fake band that is actually nicknames that people used to call me for different instruments.
I'm an angry black man. I ain't mad. I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off because most people think that because I'm an angry black man that I hate white people. Some of my best friends is white people. People think I'm supposed to frown all the time, that I'm only angry about that racial shit. I've dealt with that all my life, and it doesn't piss me off anymore. It just makes me sick. And if it makes you uncomfortable, it should make you uncomfortable.
And I put that out, and then I started learning how to use some publishing software, and I've put out 2 of my own self-published chapbooks, and I have one in the can I'm getting ready to format. What it is a self-published book that is usually 20 pages or less. I think that's the general standard.
A page that's like this, they will do it.
But I would just like to maybe try give it one more shot with the music and just keep on writing. And I'm becoming, some people are considering me, like in the Dayton area, in the black poetry community, I'm considered the godfather of poetry there. And part of it is because I have a very unique style. I try to keep my own voice, my voice, and I try to stay away from the trends, and I want to continue doing that. And just hope to just get things out there and just see what the world has for me.
I'm just really eclectic, and sometimes that doesn't look good, you know, to potential employers or other programs or whatever. My master's is in playwriting. I'm getting a degree in counseling. Who is this person? What does she want to do, you know?
I am a traveling, I am a traveling, I am a traveling, trying to find my way back home. Don't know where I'm going, don't know where I've been. If you want to follow me, come on in. I am a traveling.
My earliest memory is being in kindergarten and playing Anna in The King and I for kindergarten graduation. And I kind of got singled out to do this part. I was really excited. I had to get permission. And the kids were sort of sitting on either side of me, and I had to kind of walk in the middle and make these gestures, you know, getting to know you. And there was like a microphone downstage. It was really funny because I got kind of nervous and I wet my pants, but it was exciting. And then really, you know, did little shows in grammar school, and also my cousins and I did shows in the living room where I played the Blessed Mother. I was very religious as a child. And so we would act out Our Lady of Lourdes, and I always played Our Lady, you know, and different apparitions of the Blessed Mother in bed sheets kind of thing, you know. I've been really lucky in that, okay, I came from musical theater in high school. I went to England for a year and trained in a very technical way during college, which was verse class and Shakespeare, and, you know, it was very traditional. And then at Antioch, I got the whole political theater, guerrilla theater thing, and open theater, avant-garde stuff. New York, I went there and worked in creative alternatives in this more, you know, theater as a therapeutic tool or theater as an educational tool. But also, at the same time, I was involved in Ping Chong's company, which was a very forward-thinking, media movement-based avant-garde theater.
We care about your safety.
I mean, I'm glad that I had the variety of experiences that I had. And in a way, I feel somewhat unique because I I didn't kind of go for one thing. I remember I had talked to my agent in the 80s. I'm like, do you think I ought to move to LA? She's like, no, they wouldn't get you there. It's like, yeah, right, yeah. I'm a very associative thinker. Oddly enough, in drama school in England is where I learned about the notion of lateral thinking as a process, where, you know, if you just try to kind of hammer on down the road, sometimes you hit a dead end and you're just stuck there trying to move in the same direction. But if you can move laterally in your thought process or in your art process, lots of times there's a richness to that, and a kind of opportunity arises that you would never have imagined.
Move swiftly through the terminal. Avoid delays. Check for unaccompanied strangers.
I met this woman in Kenya, and she was traveling with a friend, and we had breakfast with her, and they looked really together. And she said she was a limnologist. Well, what the heck is a limnologist, you know? She studies water.
I'm interested in aquatic ecosystems, how they are composed and comprised, how they are nurtured and threatened, how flora and fauna, and, well, that includes people, interact with them. The who, what, when, where, why of water.
And then I remembered a dream I had years ago, which I found so fascinating, because in the dream was this little figure, and I asked someone in the dream, who is this, what is this thing? And they said it was a mystic limbic nimbic. So then I started looking up limbic and the limbic system and nimbic clouds and nimbus clouds and mystic, well, you know. Well, then I went to limnologist and I looked it up in the dictionary. Couldn't find that, but I found liminal, lim, which means to illuminate, as in a manuscript, or to paint in gold, or to portray. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Lim is to portray. Well, that's what I do, but also illuminating in gold, like a manuscript, as in a certain kind of spiritual text. Or liminality are those places that are kind of in between and outside of reality, which is what I think theater does.
I study limits, not the kind you eat, the kind that are limits, thresholds, the places below which things cease to be perceptible.
My career has been rooted much more in original work. I have this little digital camera, and I started taking footage of everywhere I went in the last few years.
You're unpaused, you're rolling all through this, and it's the NOLA video, and then the slide of
NOLA video.
New Orleans.
Gotcha.
And I collected footage from a bus ride in Kenya across the country, and also when we went down south to New Orleans after Katrina. It seemed to go somehow with the liminologist and this other character I developed called the liminalist. It's really like the scientist and the artist. And as I started to say, how can I fit Katrina, post-Katrina New Orleans with Kenya? In my Kenya footage, I had come upon a lake as we were on the bus ride. And then I realized, Katrina, Lake Pontchartrain.
Whatever you do, I beg you, do not, under any circumstances, don't, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, don't ever, ever, ever drink the water.
Well, it was a big shift to move here from New York. I had to find what my artistic community was. And I had to kind of reinvent myself and take on this function of teacher. We had 2 small children, and New York City with 2 kids in a stroller, schlepping to studios, babysitters, I mean, it was ridiculous. Whereas when we came here, there was this big theater building where my kids could come and be part of my rehearsal process, or, you know, play on Saturdays. We could clean the building and build sets, and the kids could be there, you know, with supervision. But also, kids were such a part of the fabric of the village, and they were so honored and respected by, there was a sense that, what am I trying to say? It wasn't a striated culture. Generationally, people mingled more. And that allowed me as an artist to invite my kids into my process in a way I had to leave them out in New York sometimes. But I also mourn sometimes the loss of that old self in, my old New York self, who was more of an actor. Coming here changed my art in that I rediscovered Shakespeare again and the love of language in Shakespeare, because I had to teach it and also I wanted to foster it at the college. In some ways, I had the quiet and the resources to I made 2 pieces in the 90s that I felt really proud of as a soloist. And I don't think I could have made them in quite the same way in New York. And I started to see how theater impacts a community really close firsthand, whereas in New York, we'd be doing really fantastic, interesting work. And depending on who I was working with, what troupe, sometimes we'd have packed houses, and sometimes you played to a few people, because there's so much theater in New York, it's like a drop in the bucket. Whereas here, theater's a big event.
I've been to the mountains and I've been to the sea. I've been all over this great wide world and nobody recognizes me.
Again, as I've focused on teaching the last 14 years, then in the last 4 years is my education as a therapist, and have made solo work, but had really kind of been in a state of confusion about my own process for the last few years. I feel like I'm getting some clarity now with this new piece. I want to continue to perform and write my own work, for sure. But I also see how my training can inform me to be a better teacher, and how art can inform my therapy. So right now, everything's in these separate compartments. And I think a lot of that has to do with time and efficiency and expediency. But as I free up some time and get out of school, and as my kids go off to college, I'm really looking forward to kind of going back and seeing how I can piece these things together. So how that looks, I'm not quite sure yet.
I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer, and I don't have an answer, and I'm trying to find my way back home. I've been to the mountain and I've been to the sea.
What's the third verse to that song? Could be your third verse. The third verses are the most difficult because it's easy to write the first 2 verses. The third verse is a difficult one. It's what makes the song. I've written probably about 100 songs, 50 songs, I don't know, since I've been in Yellow Springs. And I don't know where they come from. Songs just land on me. I might want to write a song, but I can't write a song. I always feel like the song was already there and that I'm just the one who discovered it. I discover the melody. Maybe I make up the lyrics. But for some reason, I get inspired by store clerks. Hey, Joanne, you ain't working at the Speedway no more. I hear you're working for the Xenia Walmart in the bakery. My earliest memories are loving music, but specifically I remember loving the Beatles from just 3, 4, 5 years old, and I begged my mom to buy me a Beatles record, and we went to the record store, and we bought Meet the Beatles, which was like the Beatles' first album, and I just loved it. And I used to, I didn't play guitar at that age, but we had tennis rackets, and I'd play the tennis racket along with Meet the Beatles. She looked like a biker chick from 1986, Joanne. We miss your big hello. We miss your big hello. Tom Jones was he was a folk singer, and he had a family band called the Jones Family back in Illinois. And he was like a big guy with long red hair and a big red beard, and he gave guitar lessons. And so I learned how to play guitar from Mr. Tom Jones. Other than that, it was just, I really admired rock bands. I grew up on rock and roll, and that's what I tried to emulate. Everybody plays guitar, but when you play bass, you're more sought after.
This is the bass line to every country music song ever, right here. Here's a free musical lesson. Every country music song in the world has that in it. It's only got 3 strings. But look, it's got too many dials there. Who knows what all these dials do? It's too much. Like, I just want no dials or 1 dial. It's too much for me. We played a gig in Dayton once at the trolley stop, and I had this in the back of my pickup truck, which is usually, I thought, a pretty good way to carry a bass around, but that night it was very windy, and the bass blew out of the back of my pickup truck, and I saw it in my rear view mirror going about 15 feet in the air and landing on Highway 35. Beth, the whole basis of playing old-time music on the bass is you're alternating between the 1 and the 5. So your typical old-time bass line is there's your 1 in the key of G and there's your 5. So then to the 4 chord. There's your 5 chord. I got some more instruments. I got a little ukulele down here that I love ukuleles. More people should play ukulele.
What do you love about it?
Just that it's small.
Mm-hmm.
They're really cute. They're actually kind of hard to play. I have a hard time playing it because the darn thing's so small. Margaret's favorite song.
I always hope that some young people would be inspired to learn how to play. That'd be the most that I could hope for, because I really think music shouldn't be a spectator sport. It shouldn't be a vicarious experience. Music is something that everyone should play. That's what folk music is. It's music that everyone can play. I really believe if you can talk, you can sing. If you could walk, you could dance. And I would just love to be able to inspire other people to learn how to play.
And then one size up, you get the baritone ukulele.
Nice. Look at that.
You ever been to the Ohio Islands?
Yes.
Love the Ohio Islands. The fish is in the water, the boat's on Erie. Everything is where it's supposed to be. So come along, baby, won't you get with me? My Ohio Island sweetheart, north of Sandusky. Well, the sun is in the sky, there's a smile on my face. Everything is in its proper place. So come along, baby, won't you get with me? My Ohio Island sweetheart, north of Sandusky. There is a place where the sky is always blue. Birds are songing, honey, that's where we belong on our little island on Erie. You and me, my Ohio Island sweetheart, north of Sandusky.
I can read music from playing piano, but if I'm learning a song, I don't learn it from sheets, although I can learn it from sheet music. Usually I just learn it by ear, or somebody tells me how to play it, or I stare at somebody's hand and watch what they're doing to learn it. But if I'm writing a song, I don't actually write the music down, I just keep it all in my head. This is a song about riding down the bike path on your first date with somebody that you really like on a rusty tandem bicycle. Rode on through the rainstorm, sunlight shining through. On my old red Schwinn bike, tandem built for two. Shortcut through the old... In high school, I just played by myself. In college, I started playing Latin music. My neighbor was this guy who was just crazy about Latin music, and so we had a band called the Mambo Combo that played super romantic Latin music, which I really like, really romantic, passionately heart on fire music. I always wanted to live in a town where there was a lot of musicians. I always wanted to live in a town where there was a lot of artists. I used to make magic wands for a living, traveling around dressing up as an elf, selling wands at Renaissance fairs and music festivals. And I came to Yellow Springs and I just immediately met a couple handfuls of people that were just great musicians and easy to get along with. Sarah Alden was living in town then, who's now a professional fiddle player in New York City. Marco Packard was living in town then, who's a multi-instrumentalist up in the Northwest now. And most importantly, I met Ben Cooper, who is a multi-instrumentalist who also plays in rhythm and shoes now. But back then, they were in their early 20s just hanging out. And there used to be jam sessions in Yellow Springs every Thursday night at different houses around town. And some of the musicians were professional quality, some of them were inspired amateurs, some of them, just knew a couple chords. But every Thursday night for years, people would just jam together, and that's how the Corn Daddies started. Ben, I, and Marco started playing together a lot, and Ben had just started playing fiddle then, and he really wanted to play old-time American mountain music, and I'd played a little bit of that, and so what we used to do is we would just play on the street is how we learned. It's a lot more, instead of sitting at home, we would just go set up on the street, we'd make a few dollars busking, learning the songs, and then Monday nights we used to play at the Dairy Freeze on Dayton Street, and we did that in spring and summer for years and learned how to play, and then Marco quit, we went through a couple guitar players, but we started getting, people started letting us play inside, and so we started getting bar gigs and private parties and weddings and all kinds of different venues. There's lots of fine folk in this blue town with a dream they left behind. Some forsaken, some forgotten by that thief named time. Could be your brother, could be your mother, all alone with one lone thought, wondering what went so wrong. But that's not me, I've not forgot. So Yellow Springs just seduced me right off the road, and it was the place that I had been looking for. And it brought me out of my shell musically. I used to be kind of shy about playing music. It was very personal to me. But playing in Yellow Springs, I just started playing with all kinds of people and releasing the music instead of keeping it inside.
To show you how lucky I am, it's really quite amazing. I always tell people how lucky I am. This is the American Heritage Dictionary. What does lucky actually mean? Because I was always saying, I'm so lucky. People are so nice to me all the time. So I got this dictionary. I looked up lucky here. Dictionary meaning, look at that. They got a picture of me next to the definition of lucky. Right there. Having, bringing, or resulting from good luck. And that's me.
All right.
There it is. So, all right. I don't picture myself as making a living playing music. Music for me is a hobby. It's something I've always done. It's something I will always do. I just can't imagine making a living doing it. Touring is very difficult. Playing bars all the time is very difficult. I don't picture myself as making a living in music.
Musicians should either be making their money as musicians, they should be living off their girlfriends, or they should be doing construction. Those are like the three valid, or just some complete dead-end warehouse job, factory job. Those are the most musical occupations. But I went back to school this past fall. Yeah, I'm in law school right now. Yeah, I love it. Not very musical thing to do, not very cool.
Having something to whistle, something to sing. I love songs. They just make me feel good and make my mind float away and feel romantic. It's just inevitable. I feel like that I play music, and I'll play till I'm an old man. I'll play as long. I'll play even if no one will play with me. I'll still play. I played before you came here today. I'll play after you leave. I don't play 24 hours a day, but I play a little bit every day. I'm always trying to find melodies in the air. I love making up melodies. Melodies are very mysterious to me. Where do they come from? I don't know. Some melodies are so simple, but no one in human history has ever discovered that melody. Melodies they're invisible, but they're all around us.
A lot of times belly dancing is associated now with this performance model, and I think sometimes people have this image that is a very Western image imposed on the Middle East of, you know, this dance of the seven veils, some slinky woman dancing around for the Sultan or whatever, when a lot of times that wasn't the case. It was the women dancing for each other too. It wasn't my intent to choose belly dance. I was really interested in taking maybe a ballroom class with my partner at that time, but he is not a dancer. And I was hoping to find something else, and I happened to see a flyer about belly dance, and I was like, well, this is perfect. I don't need a partner, and I can go try it out. And I've always loved dancing and performing, and have done different kinds of performing throughout my life. I started taking classes from a woman named Rayanne, who was teaching here in Yellow Springs, and she had been teaching here for a while, and at that time the troupe was really small, and so she kind of sped me through sort of the beginner level and threw me in with the troupe. There were a lot of opportunities to perform with Egyptian Breeze, which was really part of what made it so appealing. I danced with the troupe for a number of years, and then Rayanne decided to move out of state. She was ready for a change in her life, and I had been with the troupe the longest, so she came to me and said, I don't want this to end just because I'm leaving. What do you want to do? You know, you're sort of next in line, I guess, was the way she was thinking. At that point, I was substituting for her on a regular basis and filling in and things like that. I really liked the teaching part of things, you know. It helped me grow as a dancer a lot. It forced me or pushed me to think about the dance differently, you know, to be able to express what I'm doing in words, to be able to demonstrate it in a way that other people can see and figure out what I'm doing, and, you know, that was a whole nother level of challenge. A lot of times when women call me, they'll say, you know, I'm older, or I'm a little overweight, or I'm concerned about this. So they're wondering if like this class is even appropriate for them. And I tell them, you know, like, it doesn't matter what shape or age or size you are, you know, everyone is welcome. We have a very welcoming environment in our class. That's important to me as a teacher. And, you know, it's about getting comfortable with your body and figuring out ways it can move that maybe you didn't know it could, or ways to express movement that might be different than you've tried before. My goal isn't to teach them to be so precise or that kind of thing. It's really to help them, you know, really find fun in movement. That these two things, that your body can be a place that you're comfortable with and it can bring you joy even. A lot of what we're expressing then is sort of this feminine side of ourselves. Maybe it's something we don't express in other parts of our lives. Maybe it is. And that, I guess that comes across in some of it's being decorated, you know, so we wear our pretty costumes and our glittery things. The movements sometimes are soft and smooth, I think, but there's also a strength behind it. You know, it does take strength to be a belly dancer and control. And so we're also expressing femininity in that way too. So while there's a softness to it and maybe a sparkliness to it, there's also this strength and control that you have to have. And so there's this power that comes with it too. Except for the fact that most of us spare our bellies, but not everybody does, and not all belly dancers do. The movement is really more in our hips and our shoulders and our arms as opposed to our bellies. We do say that our show is a family show. Sometimes people are a little hesitant about belly dancers because they're not sure what to expect. I guess whenever women are dancing and their skin is showing, people have this fear maybe that it's going to be inappropriate. And so there's a lot of education that goes with being a belly dancer and helping audiences understand, or people hiring or booking the events, understand what belly dancing is, that we are expressing our femininity, and that's an okay thing to do in public, and that we're going to dance in ways that are fun and appropriate and aren't going to make anybody uncomfortable or things like that. Almost 50% of the women live in Yellow Springs, and the other women live in the towns right around us. You know, they're in Enon and Fairborn and Beaver Creek and, you know, our neighbors. So there's definitely the sense that the troupe is really grounded here in Yellow Springs.
Dancing in the Rain at Street Fair.
The Street Fair is really almost everybody's favorite performance. We have such a receptive audience. It feels like we're home. You know, there's all that comfort there. You know, we want our audience to clap along and get up and dance with us, and we get that here in Yellow Springs. I've gone to some of these dance camps that, it's called Oasis Dance Camp, that Cassandra Shore is sort of the lead teacher of, and then they always have a guest teacher too. And that's a nice, intense time where you can really spend some time learning and growing. Because I wanted to develop some of my individual skills a little more, I started taking some private lessons from a woman in Columbus. Her name's Lelia. She's been a dancer in the area for a long time. A lot of people have seen her at the Ren Fair that's in the area. She performs there and has an extensive teaching schedule in Columbus. And she's been a great individual person for me to get to have some more individual work with. One of the things I'm working on right now for myself is how to create some choreographies. You know, listening to the music, finding the nuances, thinking about tempo, thinking about how moves fit together. When choreographing for a group, thinking about the staging of it, so how it flows and changes from, you know, maybe we're all together for one part, then we're dancing in partners for one part, then we're moving across the floor, so how that sort of, those different parts flow together. So looking at all those different layers to try to piece something together. It's when you're talking about 10 dancers, you're trying to figure this out for it. It can be, it's a new way of using my brain, I guess. My daughter, I would say, is my muse. I performed when I was 6 months pregnant, and then not really after that, but I did jump up and dance like a month before she was born at Street Fair, just with the audience participation part, because I couldn't resist. It's gonna make me tear up even thinking about it. She loves to dance. We'll put on music when I'm practicing and she'll just dance with me, and she's just so free to express herself. She's only 18 months old, and it's just so fun to see how much joy dance can bring to her. And at such a young age. I'm so excited that she lives in this community where if she wants to be a dancer or be in theater or sing, that she could do any of those things. I mean, even if she doesn't do it as her profession someday, that she can have that art experience in her life and take it with her. I moved to this town not knowing many people, not knowing really anyone that lived in Yellow Springs. The first thing that I do in Yellow Springs is take this belly dance class. And now it's really a part of my persona that people know me in town. I feel like my role in the community can be one to, really offering this class is part of what I'm doing, an opportunity for people that are interested in this to learn more about belly dance and have a chance to express themselves. That's a pretty obvious part of my role. And I think the other part then of the performance side is to educate people about it, to help people understand a little bit about the dance and what it is and why we do it. And beyond that, part of the role is to, share the joy that we have belly dancing with the rest of the community and help them, see why we have so much fun dancing together.
I would love to have an art center here in Yellow Springs. It could do quite a few things for us. It could give us opportunities in a more formal structure to help some of our youngsters to develop their arts. When I was particularly as a young musician, I would try to learn chord progressions or songs from older musicians. They would tell me, you gotta learn the way I learn, and they wouldn't tell you anything. As far as performing, it gives you a venue to perform. It gives you space to workshop with youngsters. It gives you a space to bring in people from all over the country, the world, as an example for some of these people who are trying to get their arts together and to see what someone who has really worked on their craft has been able to accomplish. I think it could also provide jobs for artists, income for artists. That's the biggest thing that a lot of us artists lack, and particularly poets. People very seldom ask me to play music for free, but they're always asking me to perform poetry for free. So it gives you an opportunity to possibly make money, and I think it could provide jobs for our community too, because there's going to be a lot of service type things that are going to be operational and service type jobs that will be provided for people in the village. So I think it would be just a great thing, and I hope we get this together soon, and I'm just looking forward to it.
I'm glad that I came to Yellow Springs because actually my tastes are much more broad now, and there's many more possibilities that I can enjoy and take part in, and that's good. I don't want to be a narrow person. Well, similarly here, if the Arts Center can provide a platform for work to come in that would not have been seen otherwise, well, then we're going to all be enriched by that. And if it's problematic and provocative, we talk about it, and it brings up issues about art making and about the content, and that's all to the good. We're going to be we're already a pretty sophisticated, educated, open-minded community. I think that we're ripe for certain kinds of expression and forms of expression that we could learn about, in different kinds of ways. I mean, there's a world out there, and it'd be nice for the Arts Center to bring it to us a little bit more. So what's really interesting to me about the Arts Center is these sort of crisscrossing and seemingly contradictory projects of community-based art, because it's just, again, it comes from below, it comes from us, community-based art, cutting-edge, formal art, so that we're pushing the envelope of the art form. We're not doing museum pieces and recreations of stuff that, has been done a million times. And we're situating ourselves in the purpose of theater as a transformative tool for, opening up the perceptions, personal perceptions, and social and community perceptions. Opening up our minds to other possibilities. So that's a lot, And if you could kind of have a center where all of that was happening, that would be amazing. And I can think of artists who do that in their work that I admire, that are out there. There's models for it.
Musicians around here in Yellow Springs and perhaps everywhere, but certainly in Yellow Springs, tend to be very disorganized. I know our band, the Corn Daddies, is very disorganized. So if there was some sort of art center in town that would lend any sort of organization or any kind of form to the musical scene, it would be quite helpful, because there is such talent here, and a lot of people don't even play out. They just play in their own living room, which is fine, but music is best when it's shared. Also, an art center in town, if it could help musicians economically in some way, again, by providing gigs, by providing a venue. If there was any, what this town needs is like agents, musical agents, just somebody who could help them with the business side of music and also the arts, because even though there are such talented people here, very few of them actually make their living at art or music, and they really could.
An art center would be wonderful to have in town, and I certainly would participate. But I think its biggest value would be to maybe artists who are emerging that need that interaction with other people, and also for children who are able to take classes through it, and also to see, to have the role models of people that are really practicing artists. I think that would be very inspirational to a lot of kids. And it's also a wonderful way to fill time for many adolescents who maybe are a little bewildered about their world at some point, and it's a way of finding new and different parts of yourself that maybe you hadn't experienced before by delving into different arts. And there's so many things going on right now in town that it would be nice to see that consolidated, and that we could take more advantage of that.
Yellow Springs is an art center, in my opinion, and I think it probably would be to my liking to have an opportunity to teach what skills I have, what craft knowledge I have in the area of puppetry, hand puppets, marionettes in particular. And if the art center concept in Yellow Springs becomes highly organized, I think that would probably be something I would be interested in doing. I do have a student coming here in the summertime to spend a week. She's coming here from Nevada. Somebody recommended me to her, and so she's going to be a patron of mine, I guess you might say. So she'll stay in Yellow Springs for a week, maybe a little more, and I'll teach her what I can about how to design and build a marionette. And that's up my alley. That's something I would very much like to do. But it would have to pay. I do what I do for pay, and that's something I emphasize for any younger person or somebody getting into the craft or the art of puppetry. I suggest that it's important to rehearse until you're doing it very, very well, and don't ever perform without collecting a fee. There are exceptions to that I make and other people make when they're talking about some local situation where you can do something which is supporting your own actual physical community, and I make exception for that. But a lot of people will think that if it's a puppet show, they're not real, so you don't really have to pay them, which I'd like to break that illusion.
For a town this small, there are a good number of places to dance and perform, but none of them are ideal, and there's challenges with all of them. So, I mean, it would be fabulous to have a place to offer more classes, for people to have practice space, and performance space too. I mean, we love to have our performance season in the summer when we're outside dancing, but it's nice to sometimes perform in a place that has lights and controlled temperature and a dressing room. I mean, these are all things that we just kind of live without in our festival performances. And so it's nice to have that opportunity sometimes for people who have family members who can't really, stand all day and watch us in the crowds, who want to come and sit and enjoy the show too. So I think that it could offer a nice perk for us to have that opportunity to perform in that kind of venue. And I also think that, even just Yellow Springs is already sort of known for its artistic qualities, its artistic people, and the different things that it has to offer. And this seems like it would bring that together even more. And I think that that's good for all artists, no matter what form of art they're doing. And can also, have opportunities to bring art forms together. We've not worked with other artists doing anything, but, are there musicians out there? We dance almost all recorded music. We'd love to dance to some live music and struggled with making those connections. So how an art center could help us do that. I just think the potential is there for those kind of things. And who knows what else beyond that. The musicians is the obvious first step or first place to look for other connections. So I think an art center could do a lot of those kind of things.
Two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Live on in the springs. It's a simple, simple life. Working in the daytime and playing out at night. Small town, small town. I don't need an amplifier to hear my guitar play. Don't need a microphone to hear what I say.
Fellas, tip your hats. Ladies, curtsy too. Where I come from, folks say howdy do.
If I need some milk, well, I can walk to the grocery store. If I want a place to chill, well, that's what the stoop is for. Small town, small town. I eat a watermelon and watch the cars go by. All I need to feel good is just give it a try.
Fellas, tip your hats. Ladies, curtsy too.